I was standing 3 feet from her when she said it. Press wall behind us, champagne flutes clinking, cameras everywhere. Leora smiled like a shark in pearls, one hand raised like she was blessing a congregation. And a special thanks to our tech gal, what's her name again? She actually turned to her assistant mid-sentence. Ah, yes, our original little IT wizard, still poking around in the back end somewhere. She raised her glass. Thanks for keeping the lights on, hun. Everyone laughed, even the head chef, even the investor from Dubai who'd never met me. I felt the blood in my jaw, not boiling, not even hot, just cold. Cold like a forgotten pan in an industrial freezer. That kind of cold. I didn't smile, didn't wave. I just walked off the stage, through the kitchen, and out into the alley, past the bins marked local organic. Hey, real quick while you're listening, if stories like this hook you, tap the like button and subscribe. It's free, it helps more than you know, and it's the only way the algorithm knows we exist. 97% never hit that button, and we see you. Okay, back to it. Here's what she didn't know. I wasn't poking around. I was the one who built the entire Leora platform from scratch. The point of sale? Mine. The ordering kernel? Mine. The back-end licensing system that managed everything from QR codes to the temperature sensors in their 28K sous vide stations? Mine. Written in Go, containerized and nested under a licensing structure I buried deep in a trust clause 8 years ago when Mark and I were still drafting menus on napkins and swiping Amexes to keep the cloud servers live. My name was on the clause, not as employee, not as contractor, but as licensor. When Mark ran things, it worked. He valued loyalty. He knew what I carried, and he paid accordingly. We had an understanding. I kept the systems up, stayed out of the press, and collected bonuses that didn't insult my intelligence. I didn't want spotlight. I wanted autonomy, and under Mark, I had it. But the moment Leora stepped in, with her rebrand dreams and shiny Manhattan tech consultants, it shifted. The first clue was small. I noticed a permissions ping in my admin panel I hadn't triggered. Someone was trying to duplicate the licensing node to a new server stack. I revoked it immediately, traced the IP to one of their branding chefs, and let it slide. Then came the email from HR, phrased like a weather report, neutral, bone-dry, non-apologetic. Due to role realignments under the Leora Neo initiative, we're reassessing bonus structures tied to non-client-facing departments. Translation: you're no longer essential enough to be worth what we promised. They never outright said they were cutting my bonus. They just wrapped it in enough corporate gauze that anyone without a legal background would nod and walk away. But I didn't walk. I logged in, reviewed the trust contract, scanned line 1 and 13 where the kernel's ownership was explicitly tied to my LLC, Kellum Soft Holdings. That same kernel powered every QR code menu, inventory integration, and tableside ordering module across 29 Leora Cuisine locations, including the $8.5 million flagship launching in Miami that weekend. They didn't just forget me. They tried to erase me, with my own code still running under my license. I spent the next week in full ghost mode. No confrontation, no legal threats, just slow, surgical prep. I updated admin keys, rerouted access credentials, ensured that every franchise instance was still running clean, but under terms they hadn't read in years. Then I waited. At the pre-launch gala in Miami, I watched Leora and her brand chef bask under spotlights. I stood off to the side in a black blazer, holding a glass of water. No one noticed me. Not until she called me our little IT gal and thanked me for keeping the lights on. I felt it then, the exact moment my loyalty died. Not with anger, with certainty. By the time the champagne bottles were uncorked, the first DNS shift had already replicated. Menu interfaces wouldn't fail immediately. That would be too loud. But the publishing pipeline would be frozen by morning. No new updates, no admin pushes, just stale, cached menus that looked functional, until the clock struck midnight. And no one in that glittering room had a clue what was coming. The first time I heard about the branding chef, I assumed it was a joke. Some influencer Leora had found on a podcast between Reiki appointments and raw cacao ceremonies. But then he showed up in the Slack. Name: Maddox W. Dune. No, I'm not kidding. Maddox rolled in with NFT energy, a man bun, and a presentation deck that used the word elevate 23 times in the first 5 slides. He wore square glasses with no lenses and pitched the board on digitizing taste itself. He called my platform legacy scaffolding. He called me the original tech steward. He called himself a flavor futurist. I called my lawyer. Because here's the thing, it wasn't just ego, it was erosion. I wasn't being cut off clean, I was being buried in compliments and stripped for parts at the same time. They didn't fire me, they slowly started requesting more control. Can we get full access to the environment variables? Can we pull the database schema directly into Dune AI's sandbox? Can we decouple the payment module for testing? No, you cannot. Every time a request like that came in, I cross-checked the original clauses. Kernel, licensed exclusively through Kellum Soft Holdings. Menu publishing module, API bound to proprietary endpoints. Payment gateway, technically using my wrapper, deployed under my LLC's DevOps pipeline. I had given them use, not ownership. But Maddox didn't speak contract. He spoke disruption. He told Leora that QR menus were dead weight unless paired with sensation-driven consumption triggers. He said we needed a flavor blockchain. I watched her nod like he was Moses bringing a new digital gospel down from Mount Manhattan. 2 weeks out from launch, I was ghosted from my own sprint reviews. Then came the email from an HR manager I'd never met, someone named Braylon with a signature that included 3 pronouns and a quote from Maya Angelou. It read, "As part of our evolving org structure, we're reassessing compensation frameworks to ensure alignment with redefined role architecture. As such, we'll be revisiting your Q4 bonus eligibility in light of Leora Neo's revised digital leadership." No subject line, just that. They didn't even use my name. It would have hurt if I hadn't already shifted into surgical mode. See, I'd been watching them unravel trust with the casual arrogance of people who'd never built anything. They treated my platform like wallpaper, like something the new guy could tear down and reapply with better branding. But I knew what they didn't. Every change they made still ran on my bones. Maddox didn't realize his AI modules were interacting with sandboxed APIs that mirrored data, not controlled it. His team hadn't noticed that all publishing actions hit a proxy server that logged and tagged each request under Kellum Soft's key. Even his flavor algorithm, which was just a shallow decision tree based on price point and trending ingredients, was running inside a container I could kill in 4 keystrokes. I didn't need to argue. I just logged the email. I marked the date, and I printed a fresh copy of the 2015 software license agreement. The one with Mark's signature, the one Leora never read, the one that spelled it all out in 4 clean lines of irrevocable control. Then I made coffee, not to calm down, to focus. Because when loyalty dies, what's left isn't rage, it's clarity. I knew the moment was coming. Leora always needed a stage, and tonight she had one. A rented rooftop in Miami draped in filament lights and edible branding. Every cocktail infused with beet foam or activated charcoal or some other nonsense that made it taste like despair in a stemmed glass. A jazz trio played in matching linen. Everything smelled like sea air and overpriced ego. I kept to the fringe of the crowd in a black shift dress, watching the whole parade unfold. Maddox floated between donors like a sentient Pinterest board. His tie was printed with QR codes that didn't even scan. He kept tapping them like maybe the universe would give him a reward for existing. Then, Leora stepped up to the mic. Diamond-studded cuff on one wrist, the other hand gripping her signature, Veuve in a coupe glass she never drank from. Behind her, a projection showed the Leora Neo logo spinning like a perfume ad for the clinically anxious. "And what a journey it's been," she purred. "From our little West Palm pop-up to this, the flagship. A place where taste meets technology, where flavor has a face, and her name is Leora." Applause. I started to turn, to slip back toward the kitchen, but then I heard it. "And a special thank you to the team, and of course, our tech support." She paused, snapped her fingers, did a full circle scan of the crowd as if she'd misplaced her phone and maybe I was standing under it. "What's his name?" Someone whispered it. "Ah, yes, Nick." She smiled. "We've reassigned his bonus this year to invest in our new AI suite. Progress, after all, is about moving forward." The crowd gave that tight, awkward laugh people do when they know they're watching someone get elbowed off a cliff but can't decide if it's part of the performance. Maddox chuckled like he'd written the punchline. A few of the investors clapped too long, too loud. I didn't blink. I didn't speak. I just raised my glass a quarter inch and walked through the crowd. Past the clink of glasses and the polite murmurs and the scent of grilled scallops plated on reclaimed driftwood, through the kitchen door where the dishwasher didn't look up and the line cook just nodded, down the back stairs, out the service exit. Outside, the Florida heat hit like a held breath. I pulled out my phone, not to message anyone, just to check the timestamp. 9:17 p.m. The last publishing sync had run at 8:59. They'd thanked me on stage while my system quietly closed the gate behind them. No more updates, no more fallbacks, no more admin rights for anyone but me. The menus would look fine for now, cached and mirrored and perfectly polished. But they were already ghosts. The back end was sealed. No new uploads, no content pushes, no interface changes. Nothing they'd try tomorrow would work. It would look like a bug at first. A delay, something they could fix, but it wasn't a glitch. It was a quiet, contractual shutdown of every tool they didn't own, because they never bought them. They just assumed. I looked up at the skyline, neon against storm clouds. The wind shifted, carrying laughter from the rooftop. Probably Maddox explaining how their new flavor matrix would intuit taste through AI preference mapping. Let him. Let them all. They thought I'd be hurt, that I'd go home and cry into my terminal, that I'd beg for recognition or claw for a bonus. But this wasn't personal. It was arithmetic. They forgot the cost of cutting out the author. I simply made the code remember. I didn't drive. I didn't even start the engine. I sat in the back seat of my own parked car, windows up, AC off, dress damp against my skin. The sounds of Miami's party arteries buzzed just outside. Clinking silverware, bass-heavy club thumps, a couple fighting over Uber prices on the sidewalk. I exhaled once. Then I opened the laptop. The terminal opened like muscle memory. No UI, no prompts. Just that blinking cursor waiting like a loaded question. First script, regain ctlaccess.sh. This one quietly pulled administrative control from the tenant accounts back to my LLC master profile. It didn't revoke their login, just demoted it. All admin rights now flowed through me. They could still see the dashboard. But try to change anything, and the system would treat them like guests at a museum exhibit. Look, but don't touch. Second script, DNS Reiki Seed.pi simple and elegant. It rotated the DNS tokens on the core domains just slightly. Not enough to raise any alarms with their cloud monitoring, but enough to require validation from the original licensee. That would be me. Suddenly, their content delivery network wouldn't propagate new assets. Static pages? Sure. But live updates? Locked. Third script, neokernel local override.go. This was the heartbeat, the menu kernel. I rekeyed its publishing function to pull from a locally hosted environment. Not theirs. Mine. That meant even if Maddox's team made changes, updated dishes, swapped allergens, changed pricing, the system would smile and nod, then render the old version anyway. AI modules could run wild, but without an endpoint to publish to, they were just talking to themselves in a dark room. No alerts fired. No emails were sent. No flashing red dashboards, just the appearance of continuity, like watching someone slowly suffocate under a velvet pillow. Leora's empire was still online, but the heartbeat was under new management. Mine. I didn't toast, didn't gloat. I just watched the log window populate with confirmation lines, admin privileges, routed to Kellum Soft Primary, DNS tokens, reissued kernel publishing, override engage 3 green checks. No ceremony. This wasn't retaliation. That would have been childish. This was authorship, quietly restored. They had taken credit, reassigned bonuses, smirked on stages under golden light while my work kept their empire from crashing every Saturday night during the 8 p.m. dinner rush. They thought software was scaffolding, that it just existed once it was made. They didn't understand that code ages, degrades, evolves, and someone has to own that life cycle. Ownership isn't just paperwork. It's presence, quiet, constant, and contractual. I shut the laptop and placed it beside me. The window fogged slightly from my breath. Across the street, A valet jogged to retrieve someone's Porsche, oblivious to the fact that 10 blocks away, a flagship fine dining experience was about to serve its last working menu for a very long time. I didn't smile, I just let myself breathe. Because power doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it returns like a whisper. It started with a soft ding, the kind that usually means a waiter just closed a check or a table marked dessert in the POS. But this one came from the host stand, followed by a longer pause than normal. Then another ding. Then 5 in a row. The host tapped the screen like it owed her money. "Why is it freezing?" she whispered to the floor captain. He shrugged, pulled out his phone, scanned a QR code, and frowned. 502 bad gateway. He refreshed. Same result. "Try another one," someone said, already pulling out their phone. 3 guests at table 14 tried in sync. Same screen. Gray text. Dead link. Then the call started. Table 5 can't submit their wine order. The pairing sequence isn't loading on the smart display. The lamb just disappeared from the protein grid. Chef says the kitchen's firing blind. In the back, the expo screen showed half the orders as received, but none as confirmed. Inventory pings were delayed. Tickets vanished. The sous chef was yelling across stations about miscounts. Someone dropped a tray of heirloom foam shooters. Maddox walked in, holding an espresso and wearing a linen shirt that cost more than my first server stack. He gave a breezy laugh and said, "Tech hiccup. Let's just restart the instance, yeah?" Leora's head of digital, a 24-year-old with an NFT portfolio and a nervous tic in his left eyelid, was already on his laptop, hammering keys like brute force could bypass structure. Restarted twice. No difference. Kernel's locked. Nothing's publishing. He pointed at the error line glowing red on his screen. Push rejected. Permission denied. Non-licensee. He read it aloud. Leora blinked like he'd just said it in Greek. "Try the admin login," she snapped. I did. It's gone. Access points were pulled. DNS keys don't match. Maddox leaned over. Maybe the staging environment failed over. Roll back the deploy? The digital lead shook his head. That's not the issue. This isn't a deploy bug. The system's still up. It's just ignoring us. They were speaking in jargon, yes, but the fear? That translated fluently to everyone in the room. Waiters hovering near the kitchen stopped pretending to check cutlery. Guests were pulling out their phones, scanning again, turning them toward each other. QR codes that had worked 2 hours ago were now black mirrors. One investor, I recognized him from the LA franchise launch, walked straight up to Leora and asked flatly, "Was this system tested?" Leora gave a thin smile, the kind that might have worked in a yoga studio but cracked under scrutiny. "Of course," she said. "It's just a temporary." "Temporary doesn't serve food," he interrupted, "and it sure as hell doesn't justify 8.5 million. Back inside the kitchen, someone was yelling, "Where's the Wagyu? We already fired that ticket." At the host stand, 2 tables had left without paying. The system couldn't generate their checkouts. In the back office, Maddox was refreshing the kernel interface like it was a bad dream. He looked up. "Why is it still down?" The digital lead didn't answer. He just whispered, mostly to himself, "We don't have the keys." Leora finally said it. "Call Mark." Her voice cracked, just slightly around the name, because she knew what everyone else was starting to figure out. The system wasn't broken. It had simply stopped listening, and no one could explain why. He wasn't flashy, this guy. No linen suits, no branded cufflinks, no LinkedIn buzzwords. Just a solid man in a navy blazer and black Skechers, watching the chaos from the back like he'd seen it all before. And maybe he had. I only knew him as Hal, head of franchise ops, based out of Chicago. Rumor was he helped Mark open the original Leora pop-up in a borrowed banquet hall 15 years ago, back when they were still handwriting orders and praying the fridge compressor didn't short out mid-service. Hal didn't say much during the rollout. He'd stood in the shadows, sipping Diet Coke from a paper cup, while Maddox paraded his AI nonsense and Leora talked about redefining the flavor life cycle. But now he was watching the implosion unfold like a man who'd seen fires before and was just waiting to see who'd reach for the extinguisher first. The QR codes were still dead. Orders failed. The front desk had resorted to texting reservation confirmations like it was 2006. The kitchen was serving off paper menus printed at FedEx an hour ago, with 3 dishes crossed out in Sharpie. Hal walked over to the edge of the IT tent, really just a folding table under a branded canopy where the digital team was quietly panicking over terminal logs and trying not to look like they were seconds from throwing up. He leaned in, real low, and muttered, "Who owns the damn software again?" You could hear a pin drop in that moment. No one answered, not right away. The head of digital froze. Maddox pretended he hadn't heard. The intern looked like she wanted to teleport into a trash can. Finally, someone near the firewall monitor mumbled, "We, thought it was transferred. Like, years ago?" Hal blinked. Once. "Thought," he said. The guy nodded nervously, like he was trying to apologize for something he didn't understand. Hal didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm off or start pointing fingers. He just pulled out his phone, scrolled with his thumb, and made a call. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Mark? Yeah, it's me. No, listen. Who signed the software transfer on the back-end platform? You didn't? Are you sure?" Leora was 20 feet away, mid-apology to a B-list food critic when she saw him on the phone. She paused. Her face twitched. Not confusion, recognition. Because whatever name was about to come out of Hal's mouth, she already knew it wasn't hers. She started toward him. "Hal," she called, trying to smile, trying to float. He turned his back to her, kept whispering. The digital team was already Googling Kellamsoft Holdings like they'd just remembered a ghost story someone told them 5 years ago and now realized it was true. One of them pulled up a cached version of the original kernel license agreement. When the page loaded, she physically recoiled. It's not us," she stammered. "We don't own it." Hal hung up the phone, turned to the group. "Mark never signed a transfer. That software's licensed. Privately." "By who?" someone asked. He didn't answer, just looked across the floor toward the service hallway, where the back exit still hung half open from when I'd left hours earlier. Leora followed his gaze, and that's when her smile dropped, clean off her face. Because in all their planning, their tech decks, their bonus cuts and branding exercises, they'd forgotten one thing. You can replace a name on a slide, you can cut a check, you can even steal applause, but unless you hold the license, you don't own the system. And the person who did had just re-entered the conversation without ever walking back in the room. The morning after the collapse felt still, like the quiet after a hurricane, when the birds haven't quite come back yet, and everything smells like damp concrete and broken promises. I was 400 miles from Miami, sitting under an awning at a coffee bar in Asheville that served espresso out of mason jars and charged $2 extra for non-judgmental eye contact. I wasn't checking the news, but I didn't have to. I could hear it in the barista's whispers, in the phone screen glances of the couple beside me, in the faint Twitter chirp coming from someone's tote bag. Leora Neo was the lead headline everywhere. Opening night chaos at Leora Neo, QR failures and tech meltdown mar 8.5 Manor launch. Is AI the future of fine dining? Leora's Miami flagship stumbles out of the gate. QR code crisis or licensing lockout. Sources say internal ownership questions caused system crash. Sources. That always made me laugh. The cappuccino was good, not great, but it didn't come with a passive-aggressive HR email, and that made it taste better than anything I'd had in months. At 9:12 a.m., my inbox pinged. A short, panicked email from someone named Clifton at the law firm they use for brand risk navigation. Subject: urgent. System access restoration. Body: please confirm that you are willing to cooperate with Leora Cuisine Holdings to restore access to mission-critical systems currently affected by administrative transition. Time is of the essence. Happy to discuss compensation and expedited agreements. Let us know your availability. Administrative transition. That was cute. I didn't reply. At 12:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Mark: I didn't know she pulled your bonus. That's not how we built this. I'll fix it. I stared at the message for a long time, not because it surprised me, but because I believed him. Mark wasn't perfect, but he was never careless, never cruel. What we built in sweat and silence. Late nights, early mornings, sketches on bar napkins. My first invoice was for $100 paid in 3 installments, but it came with respect. I typed my reply slowly, just one line. Me. The contract still honors my stake. Let's begin there. Nothing dramatic, no threats, no demands, just the truth. Because for 9 years, I'd carried their back end on my back. I'd watched them rise from 4 tables and a chalkboard menu to a global brand with AI sommeliers and fragrance-paired amuse-bouches. And in the end, they tried to swap out the heart of the machine without asking the person who built it, but the foundation remembers. That afternoon, a formal inquiry came through from their parent holding company. It was titled, Clarification of IP Ownership and Licensing Terms, Leora Cuisine OS Suite. They were no longer asking me for favors. They were negotiating with a stakeholder. The headlines would shift, eventually. They always do. The public would forget the errors, the outages, the awkward silence during the launch toast when the champagne ran warm and the menus ran blank. But behind closed doors, contracts were being printed. Red lines were being highlighted. Someone in legal was digging through a file with my name on it. The same file they ignored for years because they thought I was just the back-end girl. Not anymore. The system had gone quiet, but not broken. And that silence? It belonged to me. The contract wasn't flashy. No gold seals. No trendy legalese, just 12 pages signed and notarized in 2015 when Leora Cuisine was still a gamble Mark and I were quietly betting our lives on. We'd sat in a coffee shop, me with a USB stick, him with a pen and a headache, and we both agreed on one thing. If it worked, I wouldn't be a footnote in someone else's success story. He meant it then. Now his wife's lawyers were staring at that same document like it had teeth. Page 4, Section 3B. Licensing rights for the software platform known internally as Leora OS are granted exclusively to N. Kellum, operating through Kellum Soft Holdings, under a renewable, revocable only with transfer clause. This includes, but is not limited to, front-end UI logic, back-end operations, menu publishing, order processing, and all administrative controls. No one had ever transferred it. No one had ever paid to. Mark never gave it up, and Leora never thought to check. To them, the system was a piece of furniture. Old, but reliable. Something they assumed came with the building. But they didn't read the fine print. And now? That oversight was costing them tens of thousands every hour. The kernel ran everything, every menu scan, every wine pairing, every custom cocktail that used gustatory anticipation logic to recommend a $28 digestif. All of it built on my system. And every line of code wrapped in a license that required active renewal and explicit compensation. There was no backdoor, no clause that said, unless we really need it. No emergency override for brand emergencies. Every tool they used to elevate their culinary empire, the kitchen sensor calibrations, the auto-fire meal timers, the AI integration that made Maddox look like a genius on Zoom calls. All of it required my consent to function. Not metaphorically, literally, and I had revoked it. In a conference room somewhere, Leora's attorneys were likely trying to figure out how this happened, how no one flagged the contract, how something so mission-critical had been left in the hands of someone they demoted, dismissed, and, let's be honest, humiliated in public. And that's the thing about humiliation. It doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it just files paperwork. Mark texted again that afternoon. They've reviewed it. It's locked. They know. I didn't respond. Because what was there to say? It wasn't revenge. I didn't brick their servers or crash their systems. I didn't leak code or sabotage press. I simply reminded them that ownership matters, that creation matters, that the person who writes the recipe has every right to decide when it gets served and when it doesn't. They thought they'd clipped a bonus. What they'd actually done was steal a product. And the product was still mine. The envelope was thick, hand-delivered by a courier who looked more nervous than the situation probably warranted. He held it like it might explode, like he knew something big was inside but didn't want to ask questions. He handed it to me without a word, nodded once, and disappeared down the stairs like a man exiting a scene he didn't want to be part of. I opened it slowly, not because I was savoring it, because I already knew what was inside. A formal offer from Leora Cuisine Holdings, $1.9 million for full rights transfer, a retroactive bonus labeled Goodwill Reconciliation, and, maybe most telling, a draft of a public apology. It was bland, PR brushed and full of words like misunderstanding and oversight. But at least it admitted what mattered, that the system was mine, that their brand depended on it, that the error wasn't technical, it was personal. I read it once, folded it in half, set it aside, and then I opened my laptop. My reply was 6 lines long. I appreciate the offer. However, I declined full transfer. Instead, I propose reinstating my ownership share as per original 2015 agreement. In addition, the correct authorship attribution must be publicly listed across all franchise properties, digital and physical. I expect updated menus, site footers, and internal documentation to reflect. Platform architected by N. Kellum Soft Holdings. If these terms are met, full systems access will be restored within 6 hours. Send. I didn't need more money. I didn't want a hollow apology. I wanted the truth on the record. By 7:42 p.m., changes began propagating. Menu interfaces came back online. QR scans worked. Table orders flowed through smoothly. Wine pairings auto-synced. A soft relighting of a digital world that had dimmed not from failure, but from silence. At 8:31 p.m., Leora's official channels released a brief statement. Leora Cuisine thanks Nicole Kellum for her foundational work in developing the platform that powers our experience. We are proud to formally recognize her contributions and have updated our documentation and communications to reflect her authorship. That same hour, Mark was quietly reintroduced as the executive lead to oversee technical and operational continuity. Leora? She issued a personal post, short, stripped of grandeur. I'm stepping back to focus on creative direction. The soul of Leora Cuisine is rooted in collaboration. I forgot that. I'm remembering now. I didn't comment. I didn't post. I didn't gloat. But when I checked the live version of the new menu at the Miami flagship, I scrolled to the footer, and there it was. Platform developed by Nicole Kellum in partnership with Kellum Soft Holdings. Black letters. Simple type. The truth finally served. They thought I was just the quiet woman who cooked code, but I didn't cook it. I owned the recipe.